Hello, and welcome to Wine, Whiskey, and Words, the podcast where each episode we get together, share a drink. Sometimes it'll be wine, sometimes it'll be whiskey, sometimes it might even be a surprise, something else, just something we found interesting. And then we discuss something interesting that we had between the last episode and this one. And then we wrap it up with a great discussion about whatever the hell we want to talk about.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's like we've done this a few times. We're starting to get, we're experts now.
Hey, third time's the charm.
Yeah, that's what they all say. We'll see. All right, Brad, what do you have for us? This is your week.
All right. So in 2021, I traveled around the United States for 2.5 months. And in my travels, I joined a few wine clubs. So this one is from Lobo Hills. It is a vineyard over that I discovered when visiting Woodinville, Washington. This particular wine, it's a Malbec, and it's from the James Vineyard in Waluke Slope, and I probably murdered that pronunciation.
I'm sure the people of Waluke Slope are like, what are they talking about? That's not how you pronounce that.
Well, I could have done much worse.
I spent some time in the Houston area, and there's a town that's spelled Humble, and the pronunciation is not what you think it would be.
Is it
and
Umble?
They get fighting mad if you pronounce it humble. It is umble. Okay,
Humble?
The H is silent, and
Okay.
yeah, they get fighting mad there. So you got to be careful with those name pronunciations, Brad.
I got to be careful when trying to swirl this wine here.
Yeah. So we are by the way we're recording here live from my office / fitness room / recording studio. A good friend recommended that we try a smaller room, and this is a small room. So I like the smell of this, Brad. This is really nice. What is this again? Which wine is this?
So this one, it is a Malbec.
Okay.
First, I want to see, what are you getting off the nose?
I drank it already.
You drank it already?
Sorry, I was eager. I was excited.
I almost got kind of like a cherry cola.
I can see cola a little bit. I don't know that it's cherry that I'm smelling. I smell of some fruit, but I almost want to say like a blackberry a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, I can see the cola. I can definitely smell the cola, like maybe a little Dr. Pepperish.
Yeah.
So it's a nice one.
So what the notes on this say, that it's 100% Malbec. So a lot of times when you're drinking a wine that says it's Cabernet or Malbec or whatnot, it doesn't necessarily have to be 100%. Because as long as it's 85% of that particular varietal, they can call it that varietal.
Really?
But
I would have thought that would have been higher. Like, I would have thought it really would have to be almost all.
No, it has to be 85%.
Okay.
So, but this is 100% Malbec. And what the notes on it say is that it's full of spice, smoky caramel, blackberries, and raspberries. And then on the palate, it's a little bit silky and rounded. And it's very smooth. Flavors of strawberries, molasses, which that's, I think, where that Dr. Pepper kind of comes around. Molasses, coffee, and dark cherries.
Yeah, you can taste that molasses feel to it. So this is what I like to call a sniffer. So something I've learned about wines is like I really like if I find a good wine that I can just sit there and sniff just as much as I taste, I'm really happy. And this is a really good smelling wine. I know that's weird. That's probably a special term you're supposed to use. I'm not fancy. I'm from the South in Florida, and yeah, I don't do that. But it's a sniffer. It's a
I really enjoy a wine where I can just hang around and just nose it for 5 or 10 minutes, enjoy. And that shipment that I got in today, that's one of them.
Yeah, Brad's been a shipping magnate of sorts with all his wines arriving lately.
I'll talk about that later.
Okay, all right. I look forward to it.
Talk about that later.
So yeah, I actually really like the flavor of this. You hit it on the head. It's very smooth. I think a lot of the more mass-produced Malbecs that I've had, the ones you get on on BOGO and things like that, tend to be a little more tannic, I guess maybe.
Yeah.
They hit you in the teeth a little bit. This is not that way. This is very smooth, very easy drinking. I could drink this all day.
You're getting the flavor. Most of the time when I'm drinking a heavier wine that I get this kind of flavor from, I get a lot more tannins from. But this really is the exception because it hits you. It's very smooth, and then you get those rich flavors on the back end.
Yeah, like I'm sitting here just tasting that rich caramel flavor, like just in the
Yeah.
aftertaste.
It-
It's like
it
just like
lingers.
it's like you just had a Werther's or something. It's really nice. So
I will get this again.
Good selection. Good selection, Brad.
I will never fail you, Daniel.
Don't let me down.
I won't.
Don't let me down. So, all right. So we're gonna move on. Or anything else about the wine you'd like to share?
Only that I will continue to get wine from this producer.
Okay.
It
I will
is-
continue to drink your wine, Brad.
Yes, it is Lobo Hills, and they do have a wine club. I get shipments from them probably about 3 or 4 times a year, and it's not incredibly expensive. I probably spend a few $100s each time because with a lot of these wine clubs that
And that's for a case, right? That's not.
no,
just
it's for about 6 bottles.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, you're getting a higher quality
Right.
than you would, otherwise.
Yeah, and I don't mind paying a good bit for a good bottle. Now I'm not in the hundreds, but I don't have big Brad Proust money.
Well,
So anyway, well, I guess we got to talk about what our topic was. Oh no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of us.
you are getting ahead.
What happened this week, Brad? Tell us what happened in your life.
Well, I work for Cooper's Hawk, and they sent me off to the Chicago area with a bunch of people, and it was a great time. I got to schmooze with people at the home office in Downers Grove, Illinois, and we actually went to a vineyard on the second day, where it's vineyard and winery. Actually, correction, winery, not vineyard. They source the grapes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And that's actually where Tim McHenry, the owner, the CEO of Cooper's Hawk, got the idea for Cooper's Hawk.
Wow.
So we got a tour of the place and got to try a bunch of their wines, and that's the case that I ended up getting. And it's a wine called Assemblage, and it's spelled like assemblage.
Okay.
It is a fantastic wine, and it's a Zen blend, but it's a lot heavier and a lot richer.
So I have a question. So I guess this is a personal preference that I should really ask Mr. McHenry about. But in my mind, going to just a winery without the vineyard is just kind of like, I'm there, cool, great wine. But I don't see the appeal. I mean, what was it about the winery that you thought would have inspired you to start a big restaurant?
It's first of all, it's the history. The place has been around for several decades, and it's not just a winery, but it's also a bed and breakfast. We got to go to the different rooms. They have a quote unquote like a Italian room, German room, French room, where it's kind of themed for those bedrooms. They've got a really nice looking bar. They've got a great area downstairs to go ahead and do wine tastings. And for me, it's really about the wine. Yeah, if you're going to a winery that has a vineyard, and of course you're going to have, some beautiful foliage and whatnot around there, but it's not just about that. Now, with this particular one, Linford Winery, that's where Tim McHenry got the idea to start Cooper's Hawk.
Okay.
Because he went there and thought, what about if we were able to serve food? I wonder if anyone does that. And he tried to do some research, and no one really did. So that's where the idea of Cooper's Hawk Winery Restaurant came about.
I have to say, I've only been to one place that I really felt was like that full experience winery and vineyard, where you had just a really well curated facility in the middle of the vineyards. And I can see how that was, to me, it was very inspiring. It was really just a beautiful atmosphere. Just everything about it was great. And so I could see how that would inspire you to go, hey, I could do this. We can start this. So that's cool. That's very cool, Brad.
It was cool.
My interesting thing is probably far less interesting.
I'll be the judge of that.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm sure you will. My wife and I've never really been a huge sports fan. I don't dislike sports. I love going to games, but I've never been a huge sports fan. I'm not really big on watching documentaries. But we started watching on Hulu the Welcome to Wrexham show.
Oh, okay.
And it's a documentary. Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney bought a football club in Wales, and it was a struggling club for sure. And at the point I'm in, it's still kind of struggling. They've invested a lot of money, and I understand from the show that their wives are not really thrilled at this point. But it's a really interesting show that I don't know that I'm going to be turning on soccer at 4 a.m. like they do to watch the games, but it's definitely got me feeling the energy of football that I could probably go to a game now and really, really just enjoy the hell out of it.
Well, the thing about those teams is that it's not like the United States where the teams might have been around for 30, 40, 50 years. These teams have been around for 100, 200 years.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of history in those areas. And it's also very different than the NFL, where you might have, 36 teams or whatever. I don't even know. Over there, they have hundreds of teams, and where that if they don't do well, they're demoted, and if they do well, they're promoted.
Yeah, and that was something I kind of started to understand with Ted Lasso, but I didn't realize how many levels. There were like 8 levels.
Right.
And you can get moved up and down. I mean, imagine remember a couple years ago when like the Lions were so bad, or I don't remember, it might not have been, probably the Jaguars, because, but like they were so bad. They were bottom of the league, and some of the teams, they get to that bottom of the NFL and they're like, screw it, we can get better spots in the draft if we just lose.
Right.
And so they kind of stop trying, or it feels that way sometimes. But in European football, forget it. You don't get to let that off, because you're going down a level, and you may lose your job just because, hey, we don't have the money anymore because we're not in that league anymore. Imagine if every season a baseball team got bumped and got moved down to minor league. So and then the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimps got moved up because they won it all.
That'll never happen.
Come on, the Jumbo Shrimps.
Oh God, they should have never changed the name.
Or the Savannah Bananas.
There's
a team called the Savannah Bananas, yeah.
I need to drink more.
All right. So last week, I chose a topic, and I probably was a little vague on the topic. I chose a topic of feedback. And I want to give you guys a little understanding of why I chose that topic. So my daughter is finishing up just finished up her first year in college. She loved it. She did really well. Great. And my additional background, my wife is a professor in a graduate program. So you have 2 people who are experiencing college from 2 very different perspectives at this point in my life. Well, we had gone, like the day after we got Mia back, we had gone to Disney World. We go to a Disney World a lot, so you're going to hear a lot of Disney World stories out of me. And we're in the line, and Mia is filling out her surveys. Anybody who's been in college, and probably even high school, these days anyway, got a survey, and it said, hey, what did you think of this professor? How did they do on this? How did they do on that? And Mia, I have raised her to really value feedback, to really believe that feedback is a gift. It is something that, even if it's given negatively, if you pause, you can think about it. And yes, there are some people who are just being jerks or trolls, but a lot of it is, at the root, there's some wisdom, there's some guidance, something you can take away from it. So I've taught her to value this, and she's sitting there and she's very seriously contemplating these questions. They're more or less a 1 to 5 scale. And my wife said, hey, look, say whatever you want to say in the comments, give the professors 5s. And you could almost see the physical reaction of like, this is making me really uncomfortable to have to give someone a 5 when I don't feel they earned a 5 out of 5. But my wife, on the other hand, knows that a professor's, and probably anybody who gets feedback on a numerical scale, they're expected to get the top, and the only thing that's acceptable is that top rating. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about feedback systems and maybe just, I don't know, maybe we can come up with something that we think might be better. I don't know. So that was what started it.
So the interesting thing is that years ago, when I worked for K Jewelers, we would go every year to Disney for our national managers meeting.
I didn't know that.
Now you know. And so whenever we would go, we would get a survey afterwards and about how we thought it went. And in my mind, it was, this is Disney. They're supposed to be the cream of the crop, the top of the top. And if that's what I got, then I got what I expected. And of course, it's, much better than expected, etc. And so I would answer it, I got what I expected. And it wasn't until we started getting reviews, they were doing reviews on us, on our performance, done by the customers. They would get customer surveys, and I saw what they had to say. Is it just opened my eyes, and I said, I've been doing this wrong. Because I've basically been saying that they were doing a shit job.
But you weren't. That's the thing that frustrates you, is like, I was genuinely trying to give them something that they could go, hey, people who might have said in the comments, I had a great experience, but I think you could have, smiled a little more, or whatever it was that I gave them a 3 out of 5, which is meets expectations. That was a good thing for me. I was trying to help, and I actually hurt them by doing that. That was what I found so frustrating.
I think when we're giving feedback, we have to temper it with not what we expect from them, but based on the average experience.
I think that's accurate, but we also, I think, need to go into, in our minds, what is this feedback being used for? And I hate that that's necessary, but I think it's important to remember, because we travel a lot, and you hear people say sometimes, please fill out the survey, and remember that 10 out of 10 is that's what we strive for, and that's the only acceptable outcome. And when you think about a scale of 1 to 9, a 9 is a solid. I mean, a 90% is an A. Now, back in the day, a 94 was an A, but we don't do that anymore. 90 is an A, 99% of the time now. And as it should be. 90th percentile is pretty damn high. And I think, that should be appreciated. But businesses don't give a shit. 90 percentile, you suck. Like, you failed if you got a 90%.
Well, I think because part of the reason is that if you're getting a bunch of 90s and then you get a few disgruntled guests who were expecting discounts and they didn't get discounts, and so they gave you 2s or 3s, that brings everything down.
Yeah, that's fair. So I trying to prepare for this, I did some research. And what was really interesting is it's kind of hard to find information about different systems. Now, I may not have been doing it right. I feel like I'm pretty good at working the Google, but I may have just not put the right words in. I should have asked ChatGPT and said, hey, answer this question for me.
I'm going to give you a 2 on your research.
Well, I'm going to get fired. Thanks a lot, Brad. But so what I found was most of the information that was out there was about either medical pain scales. Yeah, really interesting, right?
Should I pinch you?
Yeah. I got all kinds of information about the level of pain I'm feeling if you do. And then there were some educational scales, because that's one of the more common places. And then I did find a little bit about what I was aiming for, which was more that business-oriented, how we rate people. But honestly, the most interesting thing, there's something called a Likert scale. And the thing is, the cool thing about all these scales is they're all more or less the same. It's a scale. It's there's a bottom and there's a top, and where did you fall? But the Likert scale is more that that how do you feel about a bunch of questions. It's that agree or strongly disagree, agree, somewhat disagree, neutral to strongly agree, and you have this scale within each question, and then you aggregate your answers so that you get a sum over all these questions. So like that is the specific about the Likert scale. That was the only one that had like a really like interesting name. Everything else was more or less just numeric, or could be equated to numeric. There are numeric rating scales. So like, how is your pain? 1 to 10. And oh my God, I'm my appendix needs to come out. That's 10. Oh, I got a paper cut. Maybe a 1, 2 if you're a big baby. I am a big baby, so I'm gonna go with 3. But it happens. So then there's a verbal rating scale, which is more your mild to severe, like, oh, I'm in mild pain. And then you have your visual analog scale, which I thought was interesting. Some people, it's more of like the slider. It's like if I just put this up here, where on this scale are you? So I thought that was really interesting. There are other things that you get that are more graphical, like you get the smiley faces. But ultimately, if you have those smiley faces, you have 5 of them, you're getting a 1 to 5. But it was really interesting because everything really came down to a number. Even your bell curve, you have percentiles or quartiles or whatever it is. So like, oh, well, they're in the top 25% or they're in the top 10%. So you're making it a numerical scale no matter what you do. And I actually struggled to find anything other than loose feedback that wasn't, bottom line, a numeric scale.
Well, the thing is that, and what you're talking about makes it very kind of cut and dry and very impersonal. Whereas when I envision feedback, it's extremely personal. Extremely personal. I mean, think about the times where you had someone that was of influence to you and they said they didn't like the way that you were doing something. Or flat out, you were doing something wrong.
Or like someone you care about saying, I'm really disappointed. Like,
I won't do that again, calmly, sorry.
Oh my God. Like that is, if you want to punch somebody in the gut, have them care about you and say, I'm really disappointed in you.
Now, I had my district manager, once again, when I was with K's, I'm known to be very verbose. I think maybe not as much as I used to be.
Okay.
But we're talking about 12 years ago or so. And I was on the phone with him, and I believe he asked me a question, and I kept talking. And he said to me, frankly, he said, Brad, shut up. He said to me, I know you're intelligent. I know you know the answer. But sometimes when you talk, you tend to ramble on, and you continue to talk until you finally get to the point. Now, you're going to sound much more intelligent together if you just take a pause. No one's going to think anything less of you. If you're silent for a moment, you're just gathering your thoughts. And that was probably one of the few times in my life that I didn't immediately take offense when I was given feedback, because he put it in a frame of reference, and it wasn't automatically criticizing, but it was giving feedback in the proper way and telling me how I was going to improve.
So I think that's what's interesting is, and I think that's really what I wanted to get at in this discussion, is the most valuable feedback. When you talk about feedback, when you're talking about true feedback that is helpful to an individual, the most valuable feedback is not a number. It's not a grade. It's not anything. In fact, some of the educational sites that I found when I was researching this had some of those profound thoughts. There was a guy named V.L. Beggs who was one of the early, like, and I'm talking early, like 1800s critics of report cards. He actually said that most people, because of report cards, will conclude that the school's most important contribution to the child's education is recorded on the card. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And subsequent research actually found that grades and numerical scoring and alphabetical scoring actually discourage children. They discourage people. People respond negatively when you give them a grade because they're focused on that grade. They're most enriched when you're giving them true, genuine feedback. I remember a friend of mine when my daughter was first born, was very young, and I was doing a lot of things trying to build that picture we all saw on 80s sitcoms, maybe. Where dad's in his lazy boy, mom's cooking dinner, and all this stuff. And my friend said to me just very calmly, hey, I see what you're doing. I see why you're doing all of this. But it feels like you are trying to create this picture that isn't really natural for you or the child or anyone else. And what is it actually serving? And that feedback hit me more than if she had said, yeah, you're getting a 5 out of 10 on your parenting there. And I was getting probably a 5 out of 10 on my parenting at the time. But she said that, and it caused me to pause and say, wow, how can I be better? And I went and got better. But if she had given me you got a solid B on that, Daniel, I probably would have said, okay, well, I got a B, I'm doing okay. All right, I'm good. And moved on. And that's actually what they find with kids is if you get an A, you go, top marks, I'm good. I don't need to do any better. I'm not going to go back and reread what I did and go, man, how could I have been better? So, if I get a 5 stars from everybody that reviews this podcast, I'm unlikely to read all the comments. But if I get that 3, I'm going to go, man, I better read those comments and see what constructive feedback some people might have. Now, there are a lot of trolls out there who are going to go, this sucks. And you know what? That's like a baby farting and screaming. You don't know whether it's just farting and screaming because it's excited or farting and screaming because, oh my God, I just shit my pants. So, I think feedback, actual feedback, is where the value is. The score, maybe it's valuable, I don't know.
Now, I want to take a look and go, because I think I was guilty for many years of being that person that would give criticism without actually being feedback. And so, for instance, if I say, hey, you're doing this wrong, this is the way you should do it, where it doesn't necessarily mean that that's really the best way to do it, but it's the way that I was used to it. And so I was actually watching a podcast by Tim Ferriss in the last day or so, and one interesting thing in the podcast that he had mentioned was, an example would be for that person to ask, how are you affected by what you're talking about? And I thought that was interesting because if you were saying that to me from 20 years ago, I would have had to take a second to go, you know what? I'm not being affected by how you're doing your job. Even though it's not the way that I would do it, it's not affecting me in any way.
So I actually saw something very similar. I don't know if it was the same thing. I'm really bad with names. My sister-in-law loves to say oh, we watched this movie and so-and-so was in it. I was like, yeah, you're not, you could just tell me that Steve was in it. That'd be plenty because I wouldn't know who Steve was any more than I know whoever you just mentioned. But all that to say, I saw not a podcast, it was one of these TikTok reel type things that it was a guy who was just asking people who were protesting, I want to say it was like immigration or something, well, how has this personally affected you? And their answers were really fascinating because they really couldn't say much about how it personally affected me. And when I think about some of these things, I've started to ask, like, how has this personally affected me? Like, honestly, in Florida, more affordable produce. And I hate that. I hate that. Don't get me wrong. I hate that. But it's the reality.
You hate more affordable produce?
Well, I hate that it's happening on the backs of somebody who's kind of being taken advantage of.
All right.
And I think that's what I'm getting at is most people, if you actually ask them what they're getting out of something, they haven't paused to think, how is this actually affecting me?
Well, most people just reiterate what they see in social media.
Yeah, they're just parroting whatever somebody liked or shared on their on their feed.
Like and share this.
Yeah, please like and share our podcast. But yeah, so I actually want to get back to something you just said a few minutes ago about the right way. I actually think that after looking at all this, I truly believe that grading systems and feedback systems, like grades are more about determining who gets the money when they go to college. That's truly what it is. And if who gets the money when they go to grad school, who gets the grants, but it's not about actually helping the student. Grades have nothing to do with helping the student. And honestly, all these feedback systems, all these surveys you get are about telling the company, should you help this employee? Should you give them a raise? Should you give them a promotion? It's really not about helping that employee improve, in my opinion. Now, their manager, if they're not a dick about it, if they come and say, hey, you're doing a really good job at this, but I think you could be better if you changed these two things. That's where feedback is important. And I think, I go back to we all heard about the sandwich method, where you start with a compliment, you fill in something that's critical, and then you finish with a compliment. Nothing has changed in my opinion about that being the ideal. Everybody does something right, even if it's really minor. Hey, you wiped your ass today. Great job. But maybe you could spray some air freshener while you're in there.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you for flushing. Great feedback. I think that's the sandwich method to a T.
That's special. But going back to what you're saying about, if we're talking about it in a business context, I think the manager is really crucial, because if you're being given feedback by your manager, you have to be able to ask them, how do you envision me incorporating what you're talking about? What do you see my performance like in a week from now, in a month from now? Because when it comes down to it, they're either going to just parrot off, like, just do what I'm saying. In that case, they're a shit manager.
Yeah.
Or they're really invested in your growth.
You just made me think of something that might change my ideal a little bit. I think the best feedback is a conversation.
No, it's 100%.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I can give you feedback, but if you don't ask for clarification about, hey, okay, if I embrace this feedback, what do you envision my next interaction with the customer being? What do you envision my next course that I'm teaching being? What do you think my next paper should look like? What do you think my fifth from next paper should look like? I think that's a really good approach. I think that's pretty interesting to think about that conversational aspect of feedback and how enriching that can be if we choose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
100%.
Yeah. Well, Brad, do you have anything else you want to add on feedback? Anything? Any interesting thoughts?
Only that a little bit note that I had on there is that there's just keep in mind, if you're talking to someone, whether you're talking to them because you're the manager, or whether you're talking with your manager, there's a difference between criticism and feedback. Because with criticism, there's no going back and forth, where feedback, there's going to be more of a conversation. And I think ultimately it comes back to whether or not they're invested in you.
And I'm going to take that one further. That if you're out there in the world, you have a lot of opportunities to give feedback. Sometimes it's that survey you got. Sometimes it's you're not happy with what you got at Chipotle or whatever whatever it is that you were looking for. And I think it's important to remember that at the end of any feedback you give, whether it's personal, whether it's through a survey, there's a human being, and you can be a real dick, and you can ruin somebody's life from your feedback, but you can also be very constructive and positive and enriching and help somebody to grow. And anytime you can do that, do it. If you can help somebody get a raise because you said, well, it wasn't perfect, but it was close enough, I'm going to give it a 10 instead of that 8 or 9, do it. It doesn't hurt you a bit. If you want to say something enriching and helpful and critical, maybe say it in the comments. Because I do think people are using AI to read these comments at a minimum. And I do think sometimes you'll get, especially on Yelp reviews, you'll get actually a company that says, hey, thank you so much. That was really helpful. And we'll be sure to include that. We'll be sure to accept that and embrace that. And, think about the human being at the end of your feedback, because ultimately that's who you're trying to help, I hope. If you're just trying to help yourself, just keep your feedback to yourself, I guess is what I want to say.
Fair enough.
All right. Good feedback, Brad.
Well, thank you.
All right.
You did a decent job, Daniel.
So, Brad, what's in it for us next week? What are we going to do?
All right, well,
next
first,
week?
open up that bottle while I'm talking about that.
All right. Well, Brad, why don't you tell us about this bottle? Because you brought it
All right.
a while back.
All right, well, yeah, so I brought this a few weeks ago. So this is a meadery that I belong to, Garagiste. They're actually, they lost the lease on their location over in Tampa, and so they're closing up shop. They're around for another week or two. Mead, if you aren't aware, has been around for hundreds of years.
Probably longer than most of the things we drink.
It's basically, mead was the very first alcoholic beverage, I believe, that was enjoyed.
I believe it.
So it is fermented honey, and while you think it might be very sweet, a lot of times it is, but sometimes there's very tart aspects of it. This particular mead is a Key Lime Pie Mead. So I expect to get a lot of that, that tartness out of there, that key lime note. Should be a lot of sweetness and a little bit of that, I'm gonna say like a little creamy texture.
Okay.
Because I envision key lime pie with, whipped cream. So let's try a little bit of this.
I probably shouldn't have just had that wine but it's okay.
You probably shouldn't have, but.
So
Wow.
it's interesting when you get used to smelling things.
Yeah.
And really, all you smell on this is the honey. When you smell, I mean, I smell a little bit of the lime.
Honestly, to me, this kind of smells like a slightly tangy Dr. Pepper.
Okay.
I don't know whether I've got Dr. Pepper on my mind, but
I ruined the evening for you with my Dr. Pepper comment. But the taste is delightful. It's very sweet, but not like eating honey. It's not like that.
No, and if you normally think of honey as being thick, this is not thick at all.
No, it's
not viscous.
No, meads rarely I've found are very viscous. It's just that sweetness, that sugary flavor comes from it. I get very little lime though out of this.
It's just a little bit. It's on the very back end. I'm going to reiterate that almost Dr. Pepper kind of cola note to it. I really kind of get that. It's a little bit of acidity, the acidity that you get on the side of your tongue, the little tingle. But
I'm almost getting like a custard flavor out of the on the back end.
I can kind of get that.
Like there's that finish that's very, like you said, creamy. It's got that whipped cream-ish. I'll admit, not my favorite. I tend to lean when it comes to mead towards the more berry flavored ones.
Well, and one of the most popular ones that they had was the Reboog line.
Yes.
And Reboog, which is goober spelled backwards because when they initially made it, they called it goober, and they were quickly told you can't do that. So
Really?
yeah, that's why they had to change it to Reboog.
Why? Is
National,
there like a trademark?
yeah, goober.
That's a thing?
The jelly.
Oh, that mixed stuff when we were
Yeah.
kids. Yeah. Oh, all right. I didn't think about that.
Hello.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that one's peanut butter and jelly mead.
Okay.
Maybe I'll bring that some other time because I've got a lot of mead at home.
Well, sadly though, Brad informed me this week is the last bottling of their.
Yeah, so I got I've got some bottles to pick up this week, and as I mentioned, they've got like a week or two left over there. So
yeah, it's always sad when a place you love goes out of business. Like I said, mead's not my favorite, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy a good mead, and I enjoyed my trips that I went to Garagiste. I just
it's nice to have it once in a while.
yeah, it's not an every time. It's really good if you get too spicy of an Indian dish, and you need something to cool down. Brad has saved my soul many times from bursting into flames.
There's no saving my soul.
Yeah.
So on to next week, I wanted to go ahead and make it a little bit more lighthearted, a little more fun. Although this may not be that lighthearted. So what we're going to each do is pick our top 5 songs that have meaning. It's either meaning because of something in our personal lives or because of the message of the song.
I think I'm going to end up crying a lot in the next episode, if that's okay with everybody. I hope it's all right.
I'll allow it. I'll allow it. So I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. So.
All right.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you, everyone. If you ever get a chance to have some Garagiste, whether you got a friend's got it, or even if in the next few weeks you can make it down to Garagiste, please do. I'm sure they'd love to see you and get a farewell from you. And I just want to say I appreciate you joining us. It means a lot, and I hope you can give us some constructive feedback, not just a star or 5 stars preferably, because our managers will fire us if you don't give us 5 stars.
We've got a manager.
Yeah, she's downstairs.
Oh, yeah.
I have a manager.
Jamie is our manager, and she is very critical. She accepts nothing less than 5 stars.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
And even then, she tells us we're doing a shit job.
Yep.
Yep.
She's very much like the football coaches on Wrexham. Like they're winning and they're like, yeah, you're a bunch of shite. You know. Like, so. I don't know. That was terrible. I don't even try accents.
I'll forgive you.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we hope to hear from you next episode.
I'm Brad.
I'm Daniel.
See you next time.